Hi, I'm Dan and welcome to Polar Currency and video number 46, my top 10 large-sized $1 banknotes, part 1. It's been since last June that I did my first top 10 featuring my $2 bills. If you'd like to see that, check the description below. My top 10 ones video has been on the back burner because I just couldn't narrow it down to just 10. There are a lot of denominations of 1 in my collection to choose from, and I just couldn't make a decision. And it finally dawned on me to break the list into 2, large size and small size. I thought I had it solved until I started writing. The video got long real quick. I have to explain my criteria for selecting the top 10 notes. I purchased notes for my collection for appearance, both front and back, color, but most importantly, that they have a good story and history behind them. Those are the things that bring life to my collection. I realized that if I did all 10 of the top 10, it would be a very long video, and you know I'm not shy about long videos. So that explains part 1. Part 2 will be coming. Going to be honest here, a big reason for me to make a top 10 list is that I get to play with my currency and show it off. The notes aren't the greatest, but they're mine. As it turns out, I only have about 15 large-size 1 denominations. I have a few obsoletes, a few world banknotes, but mostly classic US $1 bills. They all got a chance to make my top 10. With that said, I'll show a quick review of what didn't make the cut. Call it honorable mentions in no particular order. There is the 1852 obsolete Mechanic and Traders Bank of Georgetown in the District of Columbia, also known as Washington, D.C. The 1950 Mexico Revolutionary Provisional Government 1 peso, also known as a Veracruz banknote. You've recently seen the 1837 obsolete Bank of Singapore, Michigan remainder note. The 1917 United States note, better known as the $1 legal tender, Friedberg number 237. And one of the last $1 large-size banknotes issued, Friedberg number 238, the 1923 silver certificate. Seeing the last 2 might stir the pot of disagreement. Well, enough with the ones that didn't make the cut. Let's get to the top 10. Number 10. The 1923 $1 United States note, Friedberg catalog number 40, this was the last large-size legal tender note ever issued. This note made my top 10 because of the red seal and serial numbers. Gotta just love them. My first large-size note I ever saw and owned was the 1923 silver certificate, and when I saw the legal tender version, I had to have it. It also made the list because it's got a great story. During World War I, a currency shortage required the U.S. Treasury issue $1 1917 legal tender notes that became available July 1, 1918. The BE printed about 320 million and many sat in a vault. Fast forward to 1922 when the Treasury Department was forming a currency standardization commission calling for currency to be more uniform in design. Here's where the government right hand has no clue what the left hand is doing. In 1923, the new design was produced and issued in December. At the same time, the 1917s were still being released by the BEP because they printed so many of them. Remember, they were sitting in a vault. The BEP also was required to issue the now new standardized 1923s. Both legal tenders had the signatures of Harvey Spielman and Frank White, who served together as Register of the Treasury and U.S. Treasurer from 1923 to 1927. Here's the ironic part. The last of the 1917 legal tender ones were released on December 22, 1925, and the last delivery of the $1 series of the 1923 legal tenders occurred 2 months earlier. Now that's good stuff. The 1923 $1 legal tender bears a new portrait of George Washington, and he's facing right this time. He had been facing left since 1869. The scalloped Treasury red seal on the right and serial numbers are that intoxicating color. The portrait of Washington is still used today on modern Federal Reserve notes. According to the Whitman Encyclopedia of U.S. Paper Money, there was almost 82 million printed with an estimated survival rate between 3,500 and 5,000 notes. The reverse has the nickname the cogwheel, referring to the decorative center ornamentation that reads the United States of America $1. A second name would be the first funny back, because the outside border is identical to the 1928-1934 series. It's just bigger. The lathe work border and detail is amazing, and you just have to love the green ink that was used at the time. It was just brighter and bolder. Number 9. The 1861 Merchants Bank of Trenton, New Jersey obsolete remainder note makes the list because it has the portrait of Abraham Lincoln and was printed at the beginning of the Civil War. The green overprint border and denominations really make the note pop. The center vignette is so detailed because it depicts a large barge being pulled by horses at a canal lock. In the background is an oxen cart with a train going over a stone arch bridge. Highly detailed and appropriate because at one time New Jersey had over 170 canals. It is odd that the remainder does have a handwritten serial number 2174 and is dated November 20th, 1861, but the note has not been signed, making it a remainder. In the far lower left is a random female figure that I have no idea who they are. A very typical thing for obsolete banknotes. Lincoln's portrait is noteworthy that this appears to be the same portrait used on U.S. government-issued 1861 $10 demand note and the 1862 $10 legal tender note. Curious because those notes were printed by the American Banknote Company and the 1861 Merchants Bank Obsolete was printed by the National Banknote Company. Two very fierce competitors of banknote printing at the time. The Kelly book number for this remainder number is NJ55G2A. The remainder is uniface, so nothing printed on the reverse except everything from the front. This is the thinnest paper I've ever seen used for an obsolete banknote. It's so thin you can see the color of my fingers through the note. Thin paper used for obsolete banknotes is very common, but this is like onion skin paper. The expression paper thin has to come from this very banknote. Hard to believe that these things survived any circulation. Maybe that was the point? If they were issued and didn't come back, then the bank didn't have to redeem them. Just a theory. Number 8. The 1891 Treasury Note, Friedberg number 351, ranks because 1. It's a Treasury note and nobody knows really what the hell they are. 2. It has Edwin M. Stanton, who was a key figure serving the Union as Secretary of War. And 3. Damn, the man has the best beard on U.S. currency. According to the Whitman Encyclopedia of U.S. Paper Money, there was almost 36 million printed, with an estimated survival rate between 1,200 to 1,400. Treasury notes are also known as coin notes because the legal obligation states will pay to the bearer on demand in coin. It doesn't say silver or gold, just coin. All of the serial numbers end with a star. This is kind of a decorative feature that served as an end suffix symbol to the serial number. They were not replacement notes. Treasury notes were born by one of the most contentious political issues of the late 1800s, the debate over the role of silver as money. The act creating the Treasury note was the Sherman Silver Purchase Act of 1890, named after Ohio Senator John Sherman, who was also the brother of famed Civil War General William Tecumseh Sherman. The act was an ill-conceived compromise bill which was approved by President Benjamin Harrison, leading to a serious drain on the Treasury's stock of gold. In November of 1893, now President Grover Cleveland, backed by popular demand for a second non-consecutive term, called Congress into a special session to have the Silver Purchase Act repealed, which it was, but not completely. That's another story. The 1891 Treasury notes were signed by Register of the Treasury James F. Tillman, sorry, couldn't find a photo of him, and U.S. Treasurer Daniel N. Morgan, who were both appointed by Cleveland, serving from 1893 to 1897. The reverse saw an entire new design in 1891 that drastically reduced the amount of engraving work. The Treasury Department wanted more open, negative area space to display the red and blue silk threads. The thought that the previous issue appeared too busy with too many details. More open space would make it easier to detect counterfeit notes. There were changes to the front, too. The front went from having a large red-brown spiked Treasury seal to a small red scalloped seal. I could argue that this note is kind of one of the greatest American currency notes from Q. David Bowers and David M. Sundman book. They list the 1890 at number 83, so I'm calling my 1891 Treasury note 83.5 on the list. Number 7. This is a Mexico Revolutionary note issued in 1915 by the state government of Chihuahua. Today, the state of Chihuahua is geographically the largest state in Mexico and borders the U.S. along New Mexico. The note was needed because hard money was very scarce, with almost no coin being issued by the federal government. Chihuahua was not unique during the Revolution. Many other states, such as Sonora, Sinaloa, Yucatan, and the provisional government from Veracruz, all issued their own paper currency. These revolutionary notes are packed in history, and it's difficult to explain the Mexican Revolution, which is really a civil war, in a short time, but here's my short summary that actually applies to this banknote. The war lasted from 1910 to 1920 and defined Mexico's modern history. The conflict led to deaths of around 1 million people, sadly most of them non-combatants. The war began when longtime dictator president Porfirio Diaz, 1884 to 1911, refused to resign from the presidency after losing the election to Francisco Madero in 1910. Diaz falsely claimed to have been re-elected almost unanimously. It's what dictators do. I mean, he does look like a huge douchebag. Massive electoral fraud was uncovered, leading to Madero and his supporters ousting Diaz from power and kicking him off to France in exile. Francisco Madero became Mexico's 37th president in June of 1911, supporting a strong central federal government that went on to adopt today's Mexican Constitution in 1917. But this came at a price. Madero was assassinated in 1913 along with the vice president by Diaz supporters in a coup. The coup went beyond the federal government, reaching the northern state government of Chihuahua, where the governor, Abraham Gonzalez Quesavantes, a political ally of Madero and who was also assassinated 3 weeks later. You've been staring at the 1915 Mexico Revolutionary State of Chihuahua 1 peso, the standard catalog of world paper money number P-S530E. The beautifully engraved blue banknote bears the portraits of Madero on the left and Casavantes on the right, honoring the two assassinated leaders. Now you know why I had to tell the story. It's worth noting that Madero's portrait is featured on the current Mexican 1,000 pesos note. The reverse features the government palace in Chihuahua flanked by two griffins, a creature from Greek mythology representing the protection of wealth, prosperity, and gold. Switching to a high-res image to get a better look at the palace, where up until 2004 the Chihuahua State Legislature met. It's cool to see two automobiles. Kind of reminds me of the reverse of the small head $10 bill. To the left are the red overprints of the General Treasury of the state of Chihuahua seal, the date of printing, and control numbers. It's just a stunning blue note. You know I like the azul. Number 6. If you've been watching my channel, you've probably realized that I kind of have a thing for Canadian paper currency, and that brings us to the 1923 Dominion of Canada $1 bill, which is a large-sized note. It may be my fascination of British monarchs being on Canada's money that adds history and my curiosity to the notes. I do know that they're beautifully designed and engraved. The portrait on this is King George V, the great-grandfather of Charles III, and is front and center. His reign was from 1910 until 1936. George was the king who adopted the surname Windsor as the British royal family's official name, replacing Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. Now that's a mouthful, and King George thought it was bad form to have an extremely German last name when your country is fighting the Germans in the Great World War. To the right is the Department of Finance seal. The Finance Department issued the notes directly from the Dominion of Canada federal government. The Bank of Canada would not be formed until 1935. Interesting footnote of the seal color. There were 6 different colors used to facilitate the sorting of notes as they were returned for redemption and destruction, according to the 2023 Charlton Standard Catalog of Canadian Government Paper Money. The note was designed and printed by the Canadian Banknote Company, formerly the Ottawa branch of the American Banknote Company. The signatures of Comptroller of Currency S.P. McCaver and J.C. Saunders, who was Canada's Minister of Finance for 43 years. Apologies for no images, but I just could not find any, and I wasn't going to drive to Ottawa. The reverse features the illustration of the Library of Parliament, the only building that survived a massive fire that entirely destroyed Parliament Hill's center block building in 1916. The library survived thanks to the building's steel doors. Parliament Hill was rebuilt, reopening in 1927. Canada catalog number for the 1923 $1 Dominion of Canada note is DC-25G, and the note was issued in 1931. Well, that wraps up video number 46, my top 10 large size ones, part 1. Stay tuned for part 2 in the next month. There'll be at least one note that will surprise you for the top spot and surely might raise some eyebrows. As always, I appreciate your time, and if you like what you see, please hit the thumbs up button, feel free to leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. We'll see you in 2 weeks, and thank you for checking in.